What a weird family photo. I want to talk about what I've been calling and referring to Nintendo's Hot Game Summer 2026. This ragtag team of games makes up what Nintendo deemed worthy of its summer lineup. Star Fox for Switch 2, Rhythm Heaven Groove for Switch 1, and Splatoon Raiders for Switch 2. Do I think these three games lived up to the expectations that Nintendo fans have? It's complicated. I say it's complicated not because I think the answer is no. I say it's complicated because this definitely is not what a typical Nintendo fan would think of when you think of seasonal defining games. When I think back to summer releases, you know, it's usually something really big. I remember 2023, I believe, was Pikmin 4, which is a huge game on the Nintendo Switch. I think back, Xenoblade 3, I believe, came out in the summer. I want to say Splatoon 2 came out in the summer. A lot of big games tend to come out in the summertime. That seems to be one of Nintendo's, real ripe times for their video games. And instead of getting one game that is their absolutely massive hallmark title, we got three kind of diversified games. And I really do think each of these games have tons of merit in of themselves. But having them all three together, I think kind of gives a Nintendo fan a lot to chew on throughout the summer. Some people might try to add, hey, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book, that came out in May. Shouldn't that be part of this video? And I'm saying, no, listen, I really like Yoshi and the Mysterious Book. I think it's a nice reinvention of the franchise, kind of giving it a new kind of direction to take the gameplay in. I'm not considering this part of Hot Game Summer 2026. I think this is at the end of spring 2026. I'm counting Hot Game Summer as games that released in June, July, and August. That's why I'm also not counting Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, which comes out in September, even though some weird people might consider that summer still. Also, I'm not considering any of the Switch 2 editions that are coming out. I think of, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 will have both released in the summer. I'm not talking about those. Those are just updates to old games. I'm talking about brand spanking new releases. Asterisk on brand spanking new. Kind of just going through, I'm not going to give a whole review for all of these games, but kind of want to talk about each of them and how I think each of these different games kind of fit into that summer game lineup and kind of go from there. So first up, Star Fox. What a guy. This really felt like Star Fox's last chance at seeing life. Star Fox has had a lot of up and downs throughout its life. The GameCube era was rocky in some's opinion. Star Fox Adventures was made by Rare right before they were bought by Microsoft. It wasn't even supposed to be a Star Fox game. Plays nothing like any other Star Fox game. Star Fox Assault had some mixed opinions. Star Fox Zero was their attempt on the Wii U to bring Star Fox back. That flunked. So really, Star Fox has already had a tumultuous history. And I think Nintendo did everything in their power to give Star Fox the best chance it could have at a revival. The fact that they included Fox McCloud inside of the Mario Galaxy movie, one of the biggest ideas for a movie that Nintendo could have had, and they said, let's include Fox McCloud. I mean, that already, big shift in the narrative for this guy. Then they take what is easily regarded as the best game in the franchise, Star Fox 64, and make an absolutely stunning remake. They did an incredible job taking what was already a well-regarded game and bringing it up to this modern era. Putting it in the Mario Galaxy movie, basing this remake off of the highest regarded game in the franchise. The Nintendo Direct in June 2026 came out. I mean, Star Fox was about to come out, and I really do believe that the reason that Direct ended with just a small teaser for Ocarina of Time remake is because they didn't want to step on Star Fox's toes. It really felt like Nintendo wanted Star Fox to succeed, and it really does seem like it did. In terms of recap for the month of June, Star Fox was, I believe, number 4 out of 5 in terms of top 5 games for that month, which is super impressive. I mean, it was topping the eShop charts, and it really just was a good showing for Star Fox. And I think the fact that they added so much more content to it, because Star Fox historically is not a long game. I mean, if you really want to be about it, I mean, Star Fox, you can technically finish the main campaign in like an hour. But Star Fox is a game that is meant to be replayed, and they included so much extra content from the multiplayer, which is good. The multiplayer is good. I've tried it and it's really good. There's not enough of it for it to seem sustainable for the long term, and I think it's totally ripe for some free updates. But quality-wise, the multiplayer is fantastic, and it adds the challenge mode, which gives you more reason to replay past levels, give you new opportunities to kind of try out different things in those levels. And so really, this game is near perfect for what it is. I really think a game like like Star Fox does well launching early in a console's lifespan because Star Fox is such a replayable game, and you just get in the mood to play something like Star Fox every once in a while. And the fact that you can, you know, rip through a campaign of it in like an hour and a half and kind of get your fix is really good over the long period of time. And so I think for years to come, Star Fox will remain a pretty good game to revisit. And honestly, I think with how well it seems like Star Fox has done, it seems like it might be back as an actual Nintendo franchise. So hopefully in the Switch Choose Life, and hopefully with Valent Studios again, we see a sequel with something original. Maybe it's original, maybe it bases it off of Soul, I don't know. Overall, I think Star Fox was a really interesting way to start off this summer lineup, especially with all the build-up that they've really given the franchise leading up to it. But Nintendo fans really only got like 2 weeks to sink their teeth into Star Fox before Rhythm Heaven Groove was released. So this was the start of July, and Rhythm Heaven Groove, man, I suck at this game so much. I thought I had okay rhythm. This game told me that my rhythm is atrocious. But in terms of sheer quality, Rhythm Heaven Groove is fantastic. There is so much content in this game that it's really remarkable. So many side modes, so many things in the multiplayer. Rhythm Heaven Groove, it just really is such an example of, I think a lot of us have, you know, in our head this idea that Nintendo is immune to terrible games. I think Rhythm Heaven Groove is what we all imagine Nintendo's games tend to be, except Rhythm Heaven Groove actually walks the walk. It's a really fantastic rhythm game. I've never played any of the other Rhythm Heaven games. I know a lot of people love Rhythm Heaven. I've wanted to play Rhythm Heaven. Most of those games are extremely expensive for their original consoles. Rhythm Heaven Fever on the Wii, I'm pretty sure easily goes over $100. Rhythm Heaven on the DS is, I think, cheaper, but still not the cheapest for a DS game. And so having an accessible Rhythm Heaven game that plays as well as it does, it's not a hard game in sense of controls. It controls super simply. You know, you use 2 buttons pretty much max. Let me tell you, it has some difficulty with there being a lot of unlockable content as well for collectors, and a really satisfying way to kind of track your progress throughout the game. I will say, as someone who's not good at the Rhythm Heaven Groove, it does get disheartening not being able to unlock some of those fun unlockables because I'm not good enough. That doesn't mean I think this is a bad game. I think this game is so stellar, something totally different to follow up Star Fox. And this game was a commercial hit too. Obviously, we don't really know the total sales numbers for any of these games, but Rhythm Heaven Groove did sell exceptionally well in Japan. Over those first couple weeks, I mean, I believe it crossed the threshold of over 500,000, and I think that was for just physical copies. So Rhythm Heaven Groove really seemed to perform well as well. Also, you can't beat it. A $40 game? Insane. I mean, I didn't mention it with Star Fox, but Star Fox was only a $50 game digital, an extra $10 if you went physical, and same with Splatoon Raiders. Yeah, for $40, the amount of content you get packed in Rhythm Heaven Groove, I mean, even if you feel like rhythm games are not your thing, try out Rhythm Heaven Groove. Its quality speaks for itself. We got an on-rail shooter, we got a rhythm game, and then we get Nintendo's take on an extraction shooter, Splatoon Raiders. I was being a little pedantic when I said we're not getting any of Nintendo's landmark titles. I know, at least for me, and I don't know if this is the case for anyone else, I kind of forget sometimes how big Splatoon really is. Splatoon is Nintendo's modern darling. I mean, the whole franchise has performed extremely well. That was one of the best games on the Wii U when that first game launched, and you know, Splatoon 2 and 3 both were exceptional games. And speaking of being bad at Rhythm Heaven Groove, I am terrible at Splatoon games. It just feels like anytime I want to go back to a Splatoon multiplayer, I am so out of practice, and the people that are playing are so good that it honestly ruins some of my enjoyment. I've always loved the way Splatoon controls. I think the controls of Splatoon are absolutely incredible. They feel so good. It's so satisfying to actually play. The movement feels so nice. The gunplay feels nice. But yeah, that multiplayer aspect always ended up kind of ruining, I don't want to say ruined my enjoyment, but limited my enjoyment because of my own skill. There kind of felt like there was a high skill ceiling for Splatoon games. Splatoon Raiders kind of fixes that with not being as much of a multiplayer PvP focus of a game. It allows you to not feel that pressure from how good other players can be. Not only that, I think Splatoon Raiders is also an exceptional response to what people were saying about Splatoon's single player offerings in the past. I was never a big fan of Splatoon single player. I didn't really put that much time into any of them. I believe I tried out Splatoon 1 single player and it wasn't anything special. It seemed like Splatoon 2 and 3 single player was pretty similar, so I didn't really give those much of a shot. I recently went back to Splatoon 2 in the build up to Splatoon Raiders release to try out the Octo expansion because I am a Nintendo Switch Online member. The Octo expansion is free of charge. I figured let me try it out. I was kind of in the mood for something Splatoon, and I heard great things about that expansion, and I do think that expansion is good. I don't want to say it's not, but even then, as a single player experience, experience. I think it has some neat things, but in the end, it was still pretty similar to the other Splatoon campaigns where, you know, you're on floating islands in the middle of nowhere and you're doing essentially obstacle courses. Splatoon Raiders answers that complaint as well, and addresses that. You are in a real world with Splatoon Raiders. Not just the real world, I mean multiple places. Obviously, the main theme is very island aesthetic, but it's not just islands. You know, you get these really cool ruins and mines that you have to go through, and really, they did such a good job with the extraction shooter kind of concept. You know, I think of other extraction shooters, and that was never my genre of choice. You know, I don't usually get into as many multiplayer games. I tend to be a single player story kind of guy. Not even story, I just like single player games. But seeing all these extraction shooters out there, you know, there has been some appeal for me because it seemed interesting. I think things like Raiders seemed to be going really well for what they were, and that was also a pretty budget release, and so I considered that at one point. I do, for the most part, tend to like my games to be more towards the Nintendo style, you know, cartoonier, you know, more animated. Something like Raiders is more of that realistic kind of game design, and I like realistic game designs. Like, I love, you know, Resident Evil games, for example. Typically, for a lot of my games, I don't tend to go towards that naturalistic style unless there's a specific kind of draw, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that feels that way. And Splatoon Raiders really does feel like a really good example of an extraction shooter that really anyone could get into. After a couple hours in, I mean, the game is just phenomenal. I mean, jam-packed with options and content so far, a variety of content. The multiplayer, I got to try a little bit of that, and it plays pretty well. That was just with online multiplayer. I would love to try this out with some friends and some co-op, and kind of experience it that way as well. Splatoon Raiders is just incredible. I mean, there's nothing else to say. Could that change by the time I finish it? Sure. Do I see that happening? Not really. Yeah, and I'm gonna say none of these games are perfect. I have gripes with all of them, but none of them are major enough to say, oh, this makes this game lesser. Some of them are just opinion. Some of them do feel like some choices that were made that I'm not sure were the best in terms of game design, but really none of those kind of hold me back from really enjoying all three of these games. And like I mentioned, you can't beat the fact that all three of these were budget releases. And I think that was very smart on Nintendo's part. After that latest June Direct, I think about Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave and that being a full price Nintendo release. And I don't want to say that, you know, Fortune's Weave does not deserve to be a full price game like that. But I do think people are skeptical on getting a game for that price, and that game being Fire Emblem. Do I think Fire Emblem fans are going to get a load of time out of that game? 100%. But I also wouldn't say that a game's price is fully justified on the amount of time that you get out of it. I think you can get loads of time out of Rhythm Heaven Groove, and I think going for the $40 price structure was perfect for this game. One thing to note about Rhythm Heaven Groove 2 is I think that this being a budget release and probably being Nintendo's last release on the Switch 1 before they go full on Switch 2, they also gave this franchise a really good chance at kind of seeing a future going forward. And I don't even think that they really wanted to not make Rhythm Heaven games. I think, you know, I believe the original developer of the game, or original producer of the game, has had like health issues over time, and so it's kind of prevented him from making more Rhythm Heaven games. But I really do think that making this the game that is on Switch 1 and accessible to everyone, I think was a really smart idea. I don't like that they announced this game and Splatoon Raiders over a year in advance. So that side of things is not particularly my favorite, because I think Nintendo spoiled us with something like Star Fox, with a relatively short announcement to release period that really allows us to get excited for a game but not feel like we're waiting forever for a game. I think back to games like Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I believe that was announced in the June Direct of 2023, and that got released that October. I mean, Nintendo's really set a good standard with that, and Star Fox is another good example. But I will say that was maybe one thing that could detract from these two games, is just the waiting period of both of them. But that doesn't matter. I mean, all three of these games are such good releases. I think some people have complaints about the Nintendo Switch 2's kind of library throughout its first year, and I definitely get it, especially when you compare it to the Switch 1's launch year. You had a stellar lineup of games in the Switch 1's first year, obviously launching with, you know, Breath of the Wild, big deal, one of the biggest games of all time, but getting Mario Kart 8 Deluxe shortly after release, getting Super Mario Odyssey in that first year, Splatoon 2, I mean, that was pretty crazy. Those are three of Nintendo's biggest franchises right there. All three of those series getting main franchise releases in that first year of the Switch. I mean, come on, it's hard to top. I would say we've not seen that to the same degree in the Switch 2's launch year, but it does feel like in terms of Nintendo's first party output, we've seen a lot since the Switch 2's come out. I should know, I've bought all of them. I wouldn't say that the Switch 2's lineup has been necessarily worse than the Switch 1's. In a lot of ways, I do think it's better. I think some people might feel like we're getting a lot of the kind of spin-offs from main franchises like Mario, for example. We haven't seen a mainline Mario game, 2D or 3D, on the Switch 2. Yeah, we had the Switch 2 edition for Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and that was good. And we got Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is a 3D Mario adjacent game. As big of a game as Mario Odyssey. But I think some people it doesn't stick in some people's brains as easily as something like Mario Odyssey, because that is Mr. Mario. That is main man, Nintendo himself. Not having Breath of the Wild, I will say, is a big hit in the Switch 2's lineup. Comparatively, especially since we, again, got a spin-off with Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Other big franchises, though, you know, Pokemon. We haven't seen a mainline game yet. We're getting one, but we got Pokopia, which was also a huge release. And so getting all these spin-offs, no matter how good they are, I think does leave some people wanting more out of the Switch 2's lineup. Honestly, I can't say that I'm part of that. I think the Switch 2 has been so fun to play these games on and to collect these games for. And honestly, do I think Nintendo's Hot Game Summer 2026 was a success? Yeah, I'm a sucker for this company. I love the games that they put out, and these three are no exception. I mean, if you are considering or were on the fence regarding any of these three games, let this be a sign. If you got the money, give it a shot, because they are incredible. I mean, what else are you gonna do? Play Dragon Drive? No thanks, I'll stick to the 5th version of Star Fox, thank you very much.